is a severe weather warning. The Northwest Weather Service reports high winds and rain conditions affecting the following counties: Austin,
Another board game. This one wasn't done by me, though. This one was done by Carla. But I really like it because the ghost figures on the back of the game are actually long-deceased family members of mine. When I was home at Christmas, I was digging through my family's basement, sort of getting an idea of what a basement has in it, just sort of for set dressing purposes. And while I was down there, I found a big box that my family actually hadn't seen. We got a big box of things from my grandmother after she passed away. And inside this box was all these tintypes, love letters and sort of emigration papers and notes from as far back as the 1850s when my family had emigrated from Scotland and Ireland. And I asked my family if it was possible that I include these in some sort of artistic project, and they said sure. They gave me their blessing, and I scanned them. And I didn't know if they were actually going to make it in the game, but then I saw that Carla had made this game, and really liked that they showed up as ghosts on the back of it. And it's sort of, I think, a nod for Idle Thumbs listeners who really feel quite passionately about ghosts, as it turns out. Surprise!
So there's a lot less density in the house than there would be in a real house. Like, if you look around your house, there's just junk piled everywhere, probably.
Maybe
like,
it's just our house.
I think it's most house.
Oh, you're right.
But So, our strategy was you either fully invest in something and, put, like, a plausible representation of this aspect of a room in, or you just don't put it in at all, and the player will fill in the gaps between, like, oh, these are all the things that represent the kind of room I'm supposed to be in, and it doesn't jump out at me that there's no toilet plungers in the bathroom, or whatever. But the biggest instance of this that I think actually totally worked, because no one has ever called it out, is, surprise, think about it, there are no shoes in this house. Ta-da!
Where's your brain now?
and I don't think anybody's noticed it, and I think it's because if we had put one pair of shoes or two pairs of shoes, people would have said, where are all the rest of the shoes?
Right.
But really, to have a plausible house, Mom would have to have 10 pairs of shoes and her work boots, and Dad would need to have some tennis shoes and some work shoes, and so on and so forth. So we just said, there aren't going to be any shoes, and we hope nobody notices. The life cycle of the condom.
That's not a real thing, Steve.
The life cycle of the condom.
All right.
By Carla Zamanja.
Is as follows. Initially, the condom was a separate plot point. It was an actual plot point. We gave it to Lonnie, and we had Sam find it in Lonnie's purse, and it made Sam worried about what the hell she was doing with it, etc. And that was sort of a wedge to drive them apart when that was the storyline, which it no longer is. And because we decided we hated it. But I had already made the condom asset, which I'm actually really proud of. I really like that condom. It's really good. Also, I think Nero is a really good brand for condoms. Anyway.
Yeah, it's a play on Trojan and everything, but it works.
But it's, it's the whole, like, notably decadent,
right,
it's like,
yeah.
Anyway, I like it. I'm proud of this thing.
And the specular on it looks really nice.
It does look good. I don't know. So we had this, extra asset lying around, and and we were like, we were all, oh, it's a shame that it's going to waste, but whatever. Sometimes things don't get used. And then we remembered the horror of digging around in your parents' drawers and finding their condoms and stuff, and being just utterly fucking horrified. And we decided we would give that to you, the player.
The sunset light in this house is the saddest thing I've ever seen. I just want to sleep. When I'm in the attic, it almost feels like Lonnie could still be here. She's just downstairs. I'm just waiting to hear her pull down the hatch and come running up. Maybe I'll go up to the attic and wait.
The fact that there are speedruns for our game makes me really happy, and the fact that, that the any percent speedrun, aka you don't have to pick up anything, just get to the end as fast as possible, has basically been optimized to, I think, 47 or 48 seconds. Even just watching that speedrun is really fun because you see the player optimize, like, for instance, the fastest speedruns, they don't turn on any lights because it would take a fraction of a second to turn towards the light switch and turn it on and then turn back to the direction they wanted to go. And, they just kind of, like, strafe past things and don't even change direction to move through the house. And then, the 100% Diaries speedrun is even more interesting because players use that secret knowledge to play the game totally out of order based on a strategy for, okay, what's the most efficient way to go to these 24 points in the game?
Like spatially, so it's like this it's the salesman, problem or something, where it has to go to all these different points, and what's the best way to do it. It's cool.
Yeah, and so seeing someone think about the house in a totally different way and a strategic way that is about this player-created challenge, that says, oh, okay, if I go into the basement first, then back out and into the east wing, then don't even go into the west wing until after, and all that kind of stuff. It's really cool to see that stuff evolve, and I'm really glad that we didn't make it so, for instance, you had to read the note about the secret door before you could even click on the secret door, because it would have shut down so many of those opportunities for people to play in interesting ways and express their mastery over the space that they've gained by playing the game.
Challenges.
This is where you find the first half of Sam's Locker, or I guess it's actually the second half of Sam's Locker combo as far as what the piece of paper is. But at first, there were the locker combination sheet was torn into 3 pieces. So you had 1 digit on each of them, and it was actually right before we sent out our IGF build to the judges. It was the night before, and Carla came down to the basement, and she was like, at 3 o'clock in the morning last night, I woke up in bed just being like, oh, we can't have it in 3 pieces, that's way too gamey. Well, that's bad, we have to fix that. And
I forgot about that.
And you were absolutely right. And you've had a couple of those being woken up by us making a bad decision kind of moments over the course of the development, and they were always important changes that needed to be made.
Conditions affecting the following counties: Austin County, Boone County, Dawn County, Tacoma County, and Wistaria County. Residents are strongly urged to stay indoors and secure all windows and doors. Flood conditions are expected at lower elevations. This is a severe weather warning. The Northwest Weather Service reports high winds and torrential rain.
When you're putting like lamps and stuff around a house, one thing that you have to deal with is plugging them in. And something that always annoys me about level design in games is when there's some lamp or piece of electronics that would have to be plugged in because it doesn't run on batteries, but it doesn't have a cable because video games. And so, since a big part of the point of Gone Home is the specificity of the house and the believability of all the details,
because of that, Steve himself...
I spent some late nights with my meager Maya skills modeling custom cables for each of the things that's plugged in so that the cables actually run from the TV or the lamp or whatever to an outlet in the wall.
It is a really good detail. I think that I'm proud of you for getting that in there, Steve. That's important. Yeah.
This is a severe weather warning. The Northwest Weather Service reports high winds and torrential rain conditions affecting the following counties: Austin County, Boone County, Dawn County, Tacoma County, and Wistaria County. Residents are strongly urged to stay...
My name is Sarah Grayson, and I do the voice of Sam Greenbrier in Gone Home. Currently based out of Portland, Oregon, so right around where the Fulbright Company is from, which is part of, I guess, how this all came to be. I started doing voiceover work probably about 4 or 5 years ago. It's been a bit of an on and off journey, because I also have had regular 9-to-5 jobs that whole time. So I always get excited when I see video game auditions come across, because it's always been something that I wanted to do, and really excites me because I'm a video game fan myself. So there was an audition that came across that at the time was entitled Dear Diary, and it had this wonderful description about being this sort of 16, 17-year-old girl. Not too much detail about her, just that she was new to her school, new to this place she was living, and her sister had moved away. So she was sort of writing out her thoughts as if she was talking to her sister. So most of the time, I'll stand up at the mic when doing auditions. But for this one, I thought, well, no one's actually going to read their diary standing up. Like, this is kind of you write your diary while lying down in your bed, or like sitting cross-legged on the floor, or whatever. So I ended up having to pull the mic down, sat on my couch, legs crossed, got nice and cozied up in like my pajamas, and started reading it.
Flood conditions are expected at lower elevations.
You know that feeling where the first moment you see someone, it's like they have a big gold star around them, and you have to get to know them? Well, there's this girl. I think she's a senior. She's usually dressed kind of punk, but sometimes I see her in this, like, army uniform, and she's always drawing in this notebook, looking so intense. I had no idea how I would ever, have an excuse to talk to her. Till I noticed she and her friends hang out and play Street Fighter at the 7-Eleven every day after school.
This is a severe weather...
So these are all the VHS tapes, or most of them, in the house. And these, in the TV room, are... from they only belong to Dad and Sam, because Mom has some VHS tapes, but they're up in the bedroom. And you can tell Dad's because he writes in a big, heavy, all caps style handwriting, and Sam does not. So, contrary to popular opinion, the X-Files tapes are not Dad's; they're in fact Sam's.
But stuff like JFK
yes.
has an obvious dad interest, and some of the other stuff that we put in there was very much like, what is a dad movie?
Yeah.
You know, what is a if when we were growing up, for instance, like what is a movie that our dad or a neighbor's dad would have? So stuff like the Andromeda Strain or Moonraker, it's just sort of like, yeah, dads
love that shit.
Yeah, dads that were born in the 50s were super into that kind of stuff. And then some of it was, you know, stuff that we liked or remembered from when we were growing up. Like, you will know that Carlo was involved in making this game because Beetlejuice and RoboCop are on a VHS tape. That's most of what you need to know about Carlo.
That's true.
Right there.
This is a severe weather warning. The Northwest Weather Service reports high winds and torrential rain conditions affecting the following counties: Austin County, Boone County, Dawn County, Takelma County, and Wistaria County. Residents are strongly urged to stay indoors and secure all windows and doors. Flood conditions are expected at lower elevations. This is a severe weather warning. The Northwest Weather Service reports high winds and torrential rain conditions affecting the following counties: Austin County, Boone County, Dawn County, Takelma County, and Wistaria County. Residents are strongly urged to stay indoors and secure all windows and doors. Flood conditions are expected at lower elevations.
When you live in one place your whole life, your next door neighbor is kind of like your default friend. And Daniel only got weirder over the years. So moving away has been a good excuse to, not see him anymore. But he did always have the good Nintendo games. Maybe I'll give him a call.
Most of the bookshelves in the house are filled with undifferentiated books. I mean, they're not undifferentiated, but they're low detail because, God, it would be an entire dev cycle's worth of work to actually do plausible spines on every single book. That would kill us. And then to repeat a whole bunch of books would also be sort of terrible and not be very plausible. So we had chiefly unlabeled books, or books in which the labels have been rubbed off due to age, etc. And we had a few individual books that were more precisely and specifically named.
The way that we did the books in the game is we made 3 or 4 of these clumps of books that have, the generic spines on them. They're just sort of filler books. They're kind of like what would be in the bookshelves of a lawyer's office in a in a cheap lawyer's TV commercial or something.
Right, where they buy them by the foot and whatever.
Yeah, and then we took 1 or 2 clumps and retextured them to all have specific readable spines on them, and then I just took those clumps and broke them up and scattered the individual books around in different bookshelves in the house, so that hopefully I think every bookshelf has at least one unique book in it. That might not be true of everything in the library since there's so many bookshelves there, but I guess I should say every or almost every bookcase had at least one unique book in it that never repeated, to kind of split the difference of, okay, they're not all generic, but also we can't afford to make them all unique, and we didn't want to have any repeat in an obvious way. So that was our strategy for trying to not do any of the things that we wanted to not do.
This is our old-timey record that we got from archive.org, source of all good things. It's by Adrian Rollini when he was with, apparently, the Taproom Gang. The song is entitled Got a Need for You, in case you can't read it, but you should be able to read it. And the duck I found on the internet. Adrian Rollini I got into him when I was on Bioshock 2 and helping source the soundtrack for that. And I did a lot of listening to 40s big band stuff, and Adrian Rollini was one of the ones that I really liked, and so it was cool to be able to revisit that.
I'm right here looking at you. If it ain't me, it's my shadow.
You think I sent you far away
I ain't been nowhere.
from me?
Sam's story slash school assignment called The Menstrual Cycle, a novella. Sam's story slash school assignment called The Menstrual Cycle, a novella, is kind of a fan favorite. We've found, like, a lot of people have enjoyed it a lot, and it's one of those weird things where it wasn't planned. Like, it was, let's see, I had decided that I wanted Sam to have done, like, some homework, and I thought sex ed homework would be interesting, because sex ed is a weird class in high school to be in, and so I Google searched for an actual sex ed assignment, and the assignment is a real sex ed assignment that is given out in, like, the Pacific Northwest, like Seattle. I think this is technically from the Seattle School District website that I got this from. So I found this thing which I didn't come up with, that I was kind of presented with, and I think I had been reading some stuff about, like, cool female spies in World War II, or, like, saboteurs, that had been part of, like, the French Resistance and stuff like that, and so that's why the history book is next to the sex ed assignment. The intended implication being Sam was doing history homework and sex ed homework, and the history unit was on World War II, and so kind of as a fuck you to all of the annoying assumptions implied by the sex ed assignment, she wrote this story about a woman in the war who was more interesting than her menstrual cycle, you know, like that is a person.
So you know what they say about the best laid plans of mice and men? Yeah, turns out it applies to Street Fighter too. At least I worked up the courage to walk into the 7-Eleven and ask for a turn, but all that practice at home did not exactly translate in the wild. So after I was finished getting my butt kicked, I followed them outside while they smoked. And that was when she asked me if I was that psycho house girl. But then she said she's always really wanted to see the psycho house. Her name is Lonnie. She's coming over tomorrow.
Sam's story slash school assignment called The Menstrual Cycle, a novella, is kind of a fan favorite. We've found like a lot of people have enjoyed it a lot, and it's one of those weird things where it wasn't planned. Like it was, let's see, I had decided that I wanted Sam to have done like some homework, and I thought sex ed homework would be interesting because sex ed is a
At Todd's brother's place after the show, there was only a futon to sleep on, so Lonnie and I shared it. The lights went out. I was turned toward her. My eyes started to adjust, and then I could see she was looking at me, too. In the dark, she smiled. My heart was beating so fast. I rolled over. I felt so, I don't know, nervous? After a minute, she put her arm around me and was so close and whispered in my ear, "I really like you." I just nodded my head, and I really hope she could tell. I really hope that she meant what I think she did. I felt like a shook-up can of soda ever since. I hope we have the chance to talk before I explode.
Dawn County, Tacoma County, and Wistaria County. Residents are strongly urged to stay indoors.
Sam's story slash school assignment called The Menstrual Cycle, a novella, is kind of a fan favorite. We've found like a lot of people have enjoyed it a lot, and it's one of those weird things where it wasn't planned. Like it was, let's see, I had decided that I wanted Sam to have done like some homework, and I thought sex ed homework would be interesting because sex ed is a weird class in high school to be in, and so I Google searched for an actual sex ed assignment, and the assignment is a real sex ed assignment that is given out in like the Pacific Northwest, like Seattle. I think this is technically from the Seattle School District website that I got this from. So I found this thing which I didn't come up with, that I was kind of presented with, and I think I had been reading some stuff about like cool female spies in World War II, or like saboteurs, that had been part of like the French Resistance and stuff like that, and so that's why the history book is next to the sex ed assignment. The intended implication being Sam was doing history homework and sex ed homework, and the history unit was on World War II, and so kind of as a fuck you to all of the annoying assumptions implied by the sex ed assignment, she wrote this story about a woman in the war who was more interesting than her menstrual cycle, like that is a person, but while fulfilling the requirements of the thing. And yeah, it ended up being this really kind of strange juxtaposition of concepts that ended up saying a lot about Sam, I think.
I feel like one of the best bits of advice was actually from the Fulbright team before going in to do the first recording. And it was a suggestion that I should watch some episodes of My So-Called Life, which was great because I'd watched them all when when they were actually on. It was one of those favorite shows my sister and I would sit down and watch every week. And so going back and watching them was definitely not a hard chore to have to do. So I basically went through all of the episodes I could find online in a couple of days. So it was a bit of a sudden binge watch of My So-Called Life, but it was great because I think watching My So-Called Life was a nice reminder of what a more natural presentation of a teenager is. So it was really... I don't know that it would have gone as well had I not done that.
Hello, my name is Kate Craig, and I was creating a lot of the environment assets for the game. Not all of them, some of them I had help with, which I'll touch on a little later, but most of the stuff like the walls and the floors, some of the larger pieces of furniture were my doing, and I'm going to be talking about some of the environmental storytelling aspects in Gone Home. I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't mention the work that my wife Emily Carroll did on the project. She did the house title image that we've used for our wallpapers and for the start screen of the game. She did the loading cassette tape, and she did the maps in the house. And actually, Carla made a font out of her handwriting because we wanted something that was just a little bit spooky, maybe a little ominous, but something that sort of suited the tone of the game. And I was really glad to be working with her, and I was really glad that the other guys were too. We had a really good time. And people have responded quite positively to her title screen, which is something that I really appreciate, and I know she does too.
We never really discussed the idea of individually scoring each audio log ahead of time. I just got an email one day from Steve after they had done the first round of voice recording with Sarah Grayson, who did an amazing job as Sam, and he said he'd been thinking about the idea of giving each log a piece of music to ground it in the proper tone. So I just started doing these short 20 to 60 second pieces, and that ended up being the bulk of the work for the game. It was a very iterative process. I did them in the order they were recorded, and I would just keep sending revisions of each log to Steve, taking his feedback, modifying the piece, and sending it back. Especially at the beginning, the feedback was almost always pull it back more. I've never done music this subdued before. Even more so than most game music, it primarily exists to quietly suggest a mood and tone to the player. Sarah's voice is always the main audio content. The game soundtrack I worked on previous to this was Blendo Games' 30 Flights of Loving, which consists of some really huge, bombastic, brassy pieces. So switching gears to Gone Home and constantly hearing pull it back, less melody, was surprisingly challenging at first. But over time, I think Steve and I developed a pretty good rapport. For the most part, the diaries required fewer revisions each time. And it's always a good reminder in a collaborative endeavor that your contribution only exists to make the whole work better, not to be seen or heard unto itself.
It's weird hanging out with girls. Daniel was around ever since I was little, and other girls? I don't know. But being around Lonnie is like instantly just right. I gave her the grand Psycho House tour and took my revenge on Super Nintendo. And it was like, I don't know, I finally found someone I feel normal around. I drove her home and she gave me this tape and said, "You have got to listen to this." I haven't stopped playing it since.
I had seen Bikini Kill and Bratmobile play their first show at the North Shore Surf Club in Olympia. That was Valentine's Day, 1991. And I was kind of blown away by the incredible rawness and the honesty that they wrote with, and the kind of flippancy that they had. I thought was really interesting. But you know, to have the opportunity to talk about all of these issues that are really important to young women, I thought was really special. And I thought that what they were doing was taking the kind of intense feminist ideas that had become popular in the 70s with, you know, SDSS, and now, I mean, those really, you know, incredible ideas and the ideology of feminism, but they were putting it into a language for today, you know, for the 90s, I guess. I mean, that was 20 years ago, but it was for young people, and it was to relate to topics about sexuality, about sex, about sexual abuse, about sexism and harassment, and all these things that are really important for young women coming of age and becoming sexual beings that are really taboo to talk about.